So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, I would like to welcome you all to today's seminar on occasion of the HKTDC Hong Kong Book Fair 2023. I would also like to thank our supporting partner, Asia Society Hong Kong Center, for their support. You may make use of the Hong Kong Book Fair app to enjoy instant access to fair updates, including latest news, event schedule, etc. You can receive the latest news through push notifications, and you can also scan the QR code to download it at App Store or Google Play. Today, we are much honored to have Miss Theadora Whittington to share with us the sand turtle. The seminar will be conducted in English. Please turn off your mobile phone or turn it to vibration mode. All kinds of recordings such as audio, video, and still photography are not allowed during the seminar. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big hand to welcome Miss Theadora Whittington on the stage.
Thank you. Can you hear me through this? Yes, this is okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, Dot. And my name is Mary, and I have great pleasure to moderate these sessions with Dot. I call her Dot, yeah, because we know each other for like nearly 15 years.
Long time.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, nearly 15 years.
A long time.
Yeah. So let me very briefly, talk a little bit about you. Okay. And actually, Dot is lived in Hong Kong since 2004. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a long time, nearly 20 years. And then prior to her base in Hong Kong, you've been in Asia, you've been in China, specifically in Beijing. And if I remember correctly, you were telling me you had been picking up the ink brush and in Beijing as well. So, and then you've always been into drawings, illustrating, and not until quite some 5 or 7 years ago, you actually, go back to school. As mature students, you were back to school taking on a master book program and illustration, children book illustration. That's quite a decision. Yeah, that's quite a decision. So, and then you were actually a barrister by training, by professional training. But strangely, you're taking on a very, very different path. Can you tell us more?
Oh, just briefly. Well, I'd always been interested in drawing, but and also music, but my life had been driven towards doing something more practical. So that's why I did study law and was a lawyer, was a barrister for a while. But when I got married, my husband took me straight off to Beijing. And there was no way I could actually use my legal skills anyway at that time. Gradually, I did use them a little bit while we were there. But meanwhile, I started doing art, which was Chinese ink painting. And it was a way of interacting with society there, with my new surroundings, which were very exciting. Some other expats with the embassies, they moved quite regularly. And I was always puzzled why they didn't interact so strongly. But it was because they moved on so much. But this was my first time, really somewhere far, far away from the UK. So I threw myself into the art world.
But then when did you start writing picture book?
Writing?
Well, you illustrating it, but when did you start writing picture book, and why picture books?
Well, I'll come to that a little bit. I'll read the story first and then talk about the nature of picture books and writing them later. But very briefly, when? I started actually writing stories. I did the BA in Cambridge in children's book illustration before I came to Hong Kong. So I had been writing some stories then as well.
So
This one actually came out of an original story about a lizard. But I will talk about that a little bit later. Yeah.
well, talking a lizard is a very personal thing. Okay, let's jump a little bit.
Okay, right.
So would you like to read briefly? I
Yeah.
mean, you read Sand Turtle?
Yes.
Because today we would be talking about a little bit about how you started writing Sand Turtle.
Yes.
And I recall you live by the sea.
Yeah.
And is it how you started your environmental awareness? And that's how it triggered you writing the Sand Turtle, and also because Dot also written The Dragon's Back, and also written another picture book called The Mermaid and the Pink Dolphin. So all these picture books are all carry a strong environmental issues and appeal. So yes, can you tell me a little bit more? Tell us.
I'll tell you a little bit more about, yes, I live by the sea, as many of us do, because the sea's never very far away in Hong Kong. But I will talk about the environmental issues a little bit more closely later. But yes, I'll talk about the reason why I wrote this story in a little while. I'll talk about, first of all, I'll tell you the story, and then I'll come on to talking about the concepts behind it, why I wrote it, and then further issues. So let me. I'm going to read this quite quickly. When I'm in schools, in front of a lot of children, and we have one child here. But I am going to read it quite quickly. I do read it a bit more slowly in front of children. But I think if I'm going to talk about it, you need to know what we're talking about. So let us see. Hold on. Okay. It was a warm summer's day. Ben and his older sister were on a beach. But Ellie didn't want to play, and Ben was getting bored. "I want something exciting to do," he said. He could see that his sister had no good ideas, so he gave up waiting for her and started to dig. When he'd finished, he called, "It's a turtle. He's wonderful. He's my friend, and I want to play with him." "I wonder what kind of turtle he is," said Ellie. "Oh, I know. He's very rare. He's a green turtle. We must look after him," Ben answered. "I wonder if he'd like something good to eat. What have we in here? Chicken wing? Banana?" But the turtle didn't look pleased. "I know what to get," thought Ben. "Would you like an ice cream?" asked Ben. The turtle didn't look any happier about that. "Well, really," sighed Ben, "what do you eat?" Since he's a green turtle, try offering him something green," suggested Ellie. Ben brought the turtle some seaweed. The turtle looked extremely pleased now. "What a strange creature," Ben remarked. "He likes seaweed more than ice cream." "Are you a green turtle because you eat green food?" Ben asked. "No," laughed the turtle. "If you look really carefully at my tummy, you'll see I'm a bit green there. That's why I'm a green turtle. But I do like the taste of all those green vegetables so many children seem not to like." "Odd way to be," replied Ben. "I'll always prefer ice cream much more than green vegetables." Still, though we're very different, we're special friends. The turtle nodded. "I like it here in the sun, talking to you." But the turtle could also see that the tide was coming in. Ben jumped up. "Come and help," he cried. "We must save the turtle." Together they tried to rescue the turtle, but the waves were approaching. Ellie called, "We must go!" Ben looked back towards the waves. He looked really hard, and he was astonished to see that the turtle was swimming. What an amazing creature, Ben thought. And then he heard the turtle call to them. "Don't be unhappy. I like to swim. I shall swim on a long journey to a beautiful land, a beach far away. I will remember you," Ben called back. "I will remember you too. Will you do something really kind for me?" asked the turtle. "If I can," replied Ben. "Will you return to this beach tomorrow and build another very special green turtle in the sand?" asked the turtle. And the next day, Ben and Ellie created another turtle in the sand. Okay, and there's the story. And if you buy the book, you can have some stickers to put on the green turtle or your sand turtle. There you are.
Yeah,
So,
such a
there we are.
wonderful story with a very warm and lively reading.
Quick.
Yeah, and this interesting story is about centered about around the themes of loss and recreation. And
I'm trying to find you.
oh,
No, it's all right. I'll find the right one. I want that one. Okay.
and are you going to read another
No,
one?
no,
on
well,
the
no,
dragon
I'm not going to.
spectrum?
No, I'm going to talk about why I created this story. Indeed, I arrived in Hong Kong, and basically, I had a belief that children's books are very important. I mean, why do we read books? Anybody? Put your hand up or just say. Why do we read books? What do they do for us? Yeah, they expand our beliefs. They're kind of parallel worlds sometimes. We take them for granted when we're adult. We've seen lots of books. And why do we look at pictures? What is it about pictures? What do they do? Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. They broaden our world. So for a small child, picture books are really the very first stories, that broadening of their imaginations that they will have. And indeed, good pictures, good illustrations are really their first art galleries. So this is important. Also, I like the way that with picture books, you have to be very careful with the words you choose. You have to be quite concise, quite short. You have to really choose. It's not easy. And so that was one reason. Another reason, it connected me to Hong Kong. So to write a story about Hong Kong was important. And there were other stories about Hong Kong at the time, and there's a great deal of inspiration. Take, for example, this one. Well-known classic. This is Hong Kong. He wrote stories about this is virtually everywhere in the world. But they're beautiful books. Really, really beautiful.
Yeah, this one is published in 1961.
Oh, yeah, it's been republished many times, and for good reason. It's amazing that it is still, the pictures aren't regarded as old-fashioned, really. I mean, the old print might have been, but they still look strangely modern, and that's the nature of a classic. And then the other inspiration, the other lady whose work I looked at, was Grace Lin, who now lives in the States. And she wrote very definitely, Hong Kong stories, good, bright illustrations. She still does write Asian, things from an Asian perspective. I've been on a conference with her. Lovely lady. So those were reasons. And then there were two other reasons, really, which we can explore a little bit more deeply. One was that the sand turtle is based on memory. It is based on the memory of digging in the sand with my mother. And that's why originally it was a lizard. Till I came to Hong Kong, when it became a green turtle. And my mother died when I was a child. And strangely enough, this story, I hadn't realized how close the story, I was telling a personal story, really, until I was told by a mother in Hong Kong, whose daughter had died, that this was her favorite book. That was strange. And then I realized it was about loss and regeneration and life continuing. So that was a hidden theme that resonated both psychologically and with regard to the environment. So the other reason, indeed, was the environment. I became interested in what was happening to our environment really before it became popular, partly because I was in a new place. And a new place stimulates. And so, yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But those are the main reasons why I wrote it. So we can come on to the... There's a role of personal story, personal memories that takes you to the story that we are reading today. And you have been dealing with this rather difficult themes. I mean, issues like death, loss. And how do you deal with it in picture book? I'll come to that in a little while. What I'm going to talk about really is first the environmental angle and the other stories. I'll just talk a little bit about the other stories that I came to, which indeed, the first one deals with a kind of loss and regeneration, which is the dragon's back. The dragon's back story is a myth, really, about the dragon's back, the mountain in Hong Kong, which I know well. Basically, it catches fire. So there's an environmental story there, and it's about saving the dragon, the fire. Of course, there have always been fires across the world, but now, that's a really, really big issue because there are too many. So it's a strangely relevant story, even more now. But it is a story that is based more on love for the dragon rather than the fear of what happens if we don't behave properly. Because I think that is usually a better way of putting across a message, a long-lasting, is to love that environment rather than be afraid if we don't. So there's a dragon's back. So I've got another picture. Oh, why are we not getting any more? Hold on. Next. Yeah, there he is, catching fire. Poor dragon. And here he is being rescued. Okay? And then the other story to do with the environment, again, a playful way of dealing with an environmental message is The Mermaid and the Pink Dolphin, also published by MCCM Creations, which has been a lot of fun in the schools. This is about overfishing and about the pink dolphins and their plight. So I can talk a little bit more about that later if you want to, but I won't spend too long on it now. I've got pictures of this one at the back for sale, or I think there's one left. Anyway, it's a fun story, and it's been well received. It was also, like the sand turtle, liked by WWF here, so they endorsed it, even though mermaids don't exist. I did have to have a bit of a dialogue about that. It is about pink dolphins, and it is about overfishing. So I was using an imaginative way of telling a story. Here she is looking for it. So there is the issue about how to put across a message, which
when you consider how you put across a message, what sort of children's age group you have in mind?
All right. Yeah, it's a good question because, mine, I would say 5 plus, but children do 5 to 8, but children do take things in at different levels. And the sand turtle has actually been enjoyed by children of 3, really quite a lot, even though I always think, well, do they know that the waves, the water is going to take away the sandcastle? They don't always. They don't have their experiences. But anyway, there are many, many, obviously, environmental books around. And one way of putting it across is straight non-fiction, just straight facts, like Red Alert, which is a UK-published book, not my own, a good writer, very good writer and illustrator. And then there's a thing called narrative non-fiction, which is, it's non-fiction put in a very story form, more like One World, which is about what's happening at different times of the day or seasons. And they're both very, very clever stories. Another way of putting across a message is just use straight fiction, which makes you then discuss the issues. And that works, I think, very well. You have to be careful when you're doing that, not to mix non-fiction and fiction so much that the child can't tell whether something's really a fact or not. So with my sand turtle, well, you're dealing with reality and imagination, and some children go, is he real? Is he really and obviously, we're dealing with fiction, but that ambiguity actually works. It works. But anyway, so there are different ways, and there are ways not to do it as well. Anyway, that's how to put across an environmental message. But yes, with mine, it's definitely fiction. But turtles, well, they swim. I remember my sister saying, lizards don't. Definitely need something else. So another reason why he became a green turtle.
Yeah.
But I can go on to that other question.
Yeah. I actually like the way you personified the creatures, the animals.
Yeah, I like doing that.
And it makes it narrow the gap.
Yes, it does.
Between people and the animals.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the role of animals in storytelling, actually. Whether anthropomorphism, why does it work? I could talk about that quite a long time. But also in religion, and religions and fables. Why animals? Which animals? And why? I find it very, very interesting. And dance as well. Animals are used in dances and in festivals. Why? Interesting. But anyway, yeah.
Dot, I actually came across some children's books in Germany some years ago, and it's about death.
Yes.
Yeah. And and the first time I came across this, I was wondering, is it for children or is it for adults? And in fact, in Hong Kong, I realized a lot of adults, they are more into illustrated books, and they've written books, what it called illustrated books or picture book. But those are very difficult subjects for children. And
Yeah, they are.
What's your comments on
Well,
this?
I could talk about it a lot, but given that the sand turtle was about loss and hope, then and likewise, really, the dragon's back. The other one is also hopeful, the mermaid and the pink dolphin. But I think, there is a greater interest now in difficult subjects for children to deal with, because children have as deep experiences as adults, and we're all human at the end of the day. It is difficult to put it across. There are different ways. This story took a long time to write. I know it absolutely did, and it's actually a philosophical discussion for older children about the nature of death. Death is the skeleton, and the duck is the duck asking the questions, and there's a tulip as well, as a mechanism of telling the story. And that is one way. It's a just straight philosophical discussion. It is very clever, actually. And then there are other ways. And I realized that my story, The Sand Turtle, was actually more like the well-known story, The Snowman. Now, many people will know The Snowman. They know it as a film, yeah? And they know it as magical, and they know it as Christmas. It's about death, actually. Raymond Briggs wrote it about death. And similar to mine, snowman exists. Yeah, made out of snow, real, like my sand. And then it becomes personified, and it dies. And the boy has a feeling of regeneration at the end. There is a feeling of hope. It's very clever, classic. I have experimented further with non-fiction. I played with all sorts. Here's one. This is a non-fiction. It's about the Himalayas. Got a bit carried away. It's vultures. It's a Himalayan food chain. Anyway, so yeah.
It looks like the way you handle. Oh, that's
Go
one
on.
more.
Karen.
The way you handle illustration or the illustration of a subject or is very important to communicate an impression, and also the style, and so it all depends on how you pick.
Yeah.
And of course the story matters. Yeah. So can you?
Yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit. I'll connect it a little bit with the theme of death, for example, how your techniques, your illustration techniques can influence the message, and they can influence it. But I would still say that the characters matter more, characterization, however you do it. Never mind materials. But for example, this one, it was a story I came across at the Hong Kong Literature Festival. It is very clever. It is about the Ukraine war, written by Ukrainians. And the characters are actually fragile. They're people. They're fragile and they're vulnerable. And Rondo is a place. So it is clever. Again, a difficult subject to put across to children. And then, I put across here, impact of technique. I have done other non-fiction, not specifically about Hong Kong, but this, this kind of technique, this paper. I got quite into paper sculpture on my MA in Cambridge. I was trying out new techniques. And so paper, ephemeral, paper goes, Hong Kong, China. We all know about paper, and again, death. It's transient. You have it in the festivals all the time. And so it's become part of my way of thinking too. So I've played with paper.
I like the way you do collage with paper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been very, very hard to do, to make it work. Here is a snow leopard on a piece of screwed up paper, actually. It took me a very long time to screw up that paper to be exactly how I wanted it to be screwed up. But again, the ephemeral, and yeah, of course, the sand turtle. I'll talk about this next issue a little bit in a bit. But the sand turtle was done a little differently, not paper sculpture, but more just straight paper collage. But the sand, yeah, the technique matters. The sand is actually St. Stephen's Beach sand that I used to print. And I use both oil, which is very permanent, oil-based printmaking ink, and I use watercolor and ink, which are very transient, again, very lyrical. So these two, permanence and transience, work together. Yeah.
So apart from paper, watercolor, oil, you also use materials that you pick up from your daily life.
Yes, I do. And some of them I use for printmaking, an imprint like the sand. And sometimes in the sand turtle, I certainly put little bits of string on the waves as well. And then, yes, photographed shells played their part. So I was beginning to develop a slightly different way of working, actually really quite early on, which I developed more on the masters when I went back and did this sort of thing. I don't know which one you prefer. I mean, you can't tell me. I don't know. Which do you prefer?
Actually, when I look at your painting, some of the painting, it has a very heavy, a heavy ink touch. Yeah. And I like the way the gradation and also the gradation of the ink and the color.
Yeah.
And is that your Chinese ink brush learning?
I think it is,
was
and
impacting on you?
and I think that when I went, this is a problem about going off to do extra study. Sometimes you lose what you've got. And I think in Cambridge, when I was doing things like this, I lost some of the fluency that I had with this, which was more rooted in the ink and the Chinese papers. I didn't have any Chinese papers when I was doing that. But some people said they could still see a Chinese influence, but I don't think it was that strong. And I think it needs to come back, actually.
Well, I can see it in both pictures, though.
Yes. Oh, well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you can.
In
I'm glad you can see that it looks like the same
way.
person's work, because sometimes I think they're too different. So I am trying to pull them together. But technique, you can get too worried about technique. Because characterization matters. It really does. The relationship between people, and indeed this relationship between the text and the illustration, where the illustration has to say a little bit more than the text is saying, and the text can be quite minimal, really, really little. And I think most illustrators like the text to say not very much. So you just add a bit more. And there's a space that can be created by a short text. It's like poetry, really. And you can add. And the imagination plays with space.
I actually like the space and composition you were doing in each illustration work.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, when I say that each illustration work, for example, in a picture book, there are normally like 30 to 32 pages, and in each of the spread page, and it was like talking to you.
Yes, and it needs to. It needs to.
And the composition, and there's a lot of strength and dynamics in each paintings.
There really needs to be, and it takes a lot of planning. Yeah, I was going to talk about the structure. Most picture books are basically a 32 pages or a multiple of 4. That has to do with the printing process, the ease of the printing process, traditionally anyway. And people often ask me about the actual writing side, and the way you create the narrative. And it basically is a fairly common structure in most picture books, but there are exceptions that work fine. You have your cover, and then you have end papers. My end papers are very beautiful. You can have a look at the end papers, or you can have a look at the back if you get the book. Or you can hold it up. You might find the stickers fall out. Yeah, stickers will fall out, but they're lovely end papers. Hey, MCCM Creations did a lovely job at doing that and then putting information there. So that's how it worked. Yeah, and then you get into the story. You put in the publisher's information. But the story is usually, there's a problem. The problem gets worse. The problem gets very, very bad. There is something terrible happening. And then there has to be a resolution. Increasingly, since I was a child, that resolution is the child, him or herself, having to find the solution. Not somebody else coming and do it for them. There's good and the bad in that approach. Sometimes I think there's bad, because sometimes the kindness of strangers is important. And we're very easily in control of our phones and feel in control. And we sometimes need to give space to people outside. So to say the child always has to find the solution inside himself can be quite, it's good and it's bad. It's good because learning to be independently minded is, of course, good. It depends, of course, what you make with your independence. So anyway, that's the way a story is. It needs a resolution. And at the end, most children's books, I can't think of any that don't, actually, good ones, do end with some kind of hope. Not a pink ribbon, not necessarily pretty, but some kind of hope. And some kind of lightness needs to be there. It doesn't have to be humour, but some lightness. So, yeah, anyway, here we go.
Yeah, I agree. We need hope and wit.
Yeah.
And lightness.
Yeah, a lightness.
I mean, it's kind of a reading experience that you wish to live behind, right?
You do. It's lightness. Yeah. I like that word rather than sometimes humour, which means down on the earth, really. But we all think it just means ha 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 ha, got to have a laugh, which is also good. That is lightness. But there are other kinds of lightness too. So, yeah.
I saw some sketches on your slide.
You did.
So you're talking. You're going to show us some of your process sketches.
Just a little, just few here. I was rather amazed that I'd still got any. We are encouraged at art school to keep a sketchbook. I'm not very good at keeping a sketchbook. I tend to, because I don't really want them to be studied by tutors. Because they say, it's private. It's your private scribbling. And you think, oh yeah, and you're going to mark it. Huh? So I tend to scribble on anything. really anything. But there are some that made their way into a sketchbook, as you can see. And I start with really scribbles, more scribbly than some of which you will see here. But you experiment with the character, and there's a lot of this. Probably I don't do enough, actually, but there's a lot.
When you are doing these sketches, have you had a story in mind, or no? It's just a snapshot of just snapshot, and then only when it comes to the very end, you try to map things together. Is that how it goes with you?
For me, it varies. I am a bit of a mess, as many author illustrators are. And some people like to start with a straight text and then illustrate it. Helen Oxenbury, who some of you may have come across as an illustrator, very well known, that's how she likes it. She likes the text settled and then to draw it. And some people, particularly in Cambridge, I found, actually almost create the characters before they create the story. They do a lot of characters, and then it's out of doing a character that they create the story. And I kind of do a mixture of both. I do start writing the story, and then I do some pictures, and then I change the story, and I change the pictures, and then the story, and the pictures, and the story. And sometimes I've turned the pictures into more like finished artwork, and I change the wretched story again, so I have to change the pictures again. And then the publisher makes some suggestions, and then you change the pictures again, and then again, and again, and again.
Non-stop.
Indeed, until eventually you say, right, we've got to publish this thing. So out it goes.
We'll
and even now, I would change things, and you probably would do too.
So tell us how many sketchbooks you've kept.
Well, sketchbook, I don't know. I have many sketchbooks. I did try in Cambridge to keep sketchbooks as well. I have a lot of pieces of paper. And for my MA, I actually handed in, I made sketchbooks out of my scribbles because they wanted them. So I put them in a progressive pile. I don't think the tutors really looked at them. They just gave a mark. But, yeah, I've got a lot of paper. But I do throw away a lot, and I shouldn't throw away it. I threw away a lot that I had in England before I came to Hong Kong, and I had to, because it was being stored in the UK, and one summer we had to take it out of storage. And I had a big rubbish tip, and my husband will still remember, it was on a farm where we were storing things, and it was kind of, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and most of it went. A lot went. So there we are. But anyway, you can see the one at the bottom there with the little boy and the turtle. And you can see that's pretty close to what we got. It got turned around. But, yeah, that's what happened. And then, hey, they go into schools. And the children ask all kinds of questions. And I learn from the children. I learn what works and what doesn't, and their curiosities. And that's very important. I should do more art classes with children when I have time. I learn from children. Well, it's also fun. They learn from me, I learn from them. Hey, you all make a mess. Yeah.
Do you consider yourself an illustrator or a writer or both?
Well, I think I'm more of an illustrator, really, because I started with art before I started writing. But there's a strong narrative element, even in my artwork, which you can see online. The things that I just sell as gallery things. There's usually a narrative element. Sometimes there are portraits. But I'm an artist, really. I think now artist illustrator, but story is really important, and I do like words. Well, I'm trained as a lawyer originally. Words words. The lawyers often use a lot of words, and they don't need a lot of words. I have a friend in the audience who is a lawyer who will try to help cut through a lot of words. But no, I like words. So, okay. Yeah.
And you're a good storyteller as well.
Well, I do like stories. Yeah.
And I realized, like in France, illustrators and writers they are actually taken up by two different persons. So
Yeah.
it's two different roles, two persons. And
Often, yeah.
Well, in Taiwan, they also like
And in the
it's
UK.
a collaboration of a writer and an
Yeah,
illustrator.
yeah.
But I realize in Hong Kong, more and more people actually taking up both
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they want to be the author. They are playing illustrating role and also writing role. So how do you see that?
Well, I think, shall we start with, if you're an author who's not been trained to be an illustrator, I think you need some sort of training. That training doesn't have to be formal, maybe courses, but you really have to go out and draw and observe and spy. You have to look inside you, outside you, and find your own narrative. The other way around, there are many illustrators who aren't very good writers. But actually, a lot of publishers in the UK and elsewhere actually do quite like to have both together if they can. It's cheaper. It's actually cheaper. The debut author illustrator is often cheaper, and they hope that they're going to turn into the great big stars of the future. Often that does happen out of the Cambridge School of Art lot. Certainly it does. And agents like people to be both quite often. Again, they're going to get double royalties or shares. So there's a trend, particularly in the US, thing together. But in France and Germany, no, they're fairly separate. Britain, it's mixed. It's very mixed. Non-fiction, I've tried writing it. And of course, the problem is it requires a lot of research as a writer. And I'm not sure I want to do that. Again, stories are going to be easier for me. But yeah.
And we're talking about trends.
Yeah.
And
which is coming on.
well, is there a trends or themes that you have spot in Hong Kong or in UK?
Well,
where you just
in Hong Kong, there's still a big interest in making things very specifically Hong Kong related. There are a few books that aren't, but most are. People know that the children here are going to relate first and foremost. There's a resonance to a local interest. But abroad, now, I was having a good look in London in the Tate bookshop and other bookshops. And there's a definite trend, for example, fiction, modern issues are definitely really, really there. Here is one that I think is very clever, beautiful illustrations, and it's been banned because it's about gender identity. It has been banned, but it's also certainly been listed for many an award. Again, comes from an illustrator who is at Cambridge. Julian is a mermaid. Anyway, I can tell you the story, but we probably don't have time. And then there's the boy with the flowers in his hair. That's a story really about friendship. A boy who is a bit girlish. He comes to school, he has flowers in his hair, then one day he comes to school and he's got a hat on and he's got twigs, not flowers. So it could be a metaphor for cancer. Something has happened. And it's about how the children deal with it. Again, a difficult issue. It's about friendship. And in the COVID years, out of those years, have come quite a lot of serious books. But I heard an art director at Simon & Schuster saying recently, not sure people post-COVID want that anymore. They want humor, ha, 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 humor, really lightness. So Don't Be Silly, for example. The author is actually, she's a Buddhist, who's in Cambridge. And this is a very silly story. It's about some children who have a very nasty kind of judge, kind of king father, and they just do silly things, really. It's very nice. It's very light. So we're dealing with lightness. And I think she'll go quite a long way. Her philosophy is, again, of lightness. So I don't know if I had any more. Oh, yeah, well, others are mine.
Yes, and about a little bit more about trends. And of themes. Apart from this gender issues or war, and I realized these topics were not present like 10 years ago.
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
No.
So that over the last...
or just not around as much.
But over the last 5 to 10 years, themes... picture book themes has been like more down to earth, more closer to life.
I think
instead
I
of
think
just animals.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Stories.
Animals are still very useful. Interestingly, these 3 books I've just shown you are not. They're directly human. Julian is Julian. And the boy with flowers is a boy, and these children are, and Don't Be Silly, are children. The anthropomorphic is still around. But interestingly, putting children directly there is a bit like I find a portrait. When I draw pictures that are portraits of people, figure drawings, they're sometimes sometimes people find them harder to sell, because they're kind of confrontational. People don't want them on their walls so much as they want a landscape or something abstract. There's something a bit confrontational. I think there's a daring in children's picture books now, a bravery, which makes them, for children and for adults too, again, simple, straight language. And I like that. I think it's a good trend. Things to discuss.
So, Dot, closer to the end, I want to ask, what have you been working lately? And I know you have been doing a lot of drawings and sketches on different subjects, like portraits. I love the portraits that you did at the MTR. And a lot of Hong Kong cultures, etc. So what have you been doing lately?
Well, I've been experimenting. I mean, during the COVID years, you sit at home and work. So, I mean, I've been experimenting beyond what I learned in Cambridge the second time, trying to bring themes together. And I've, anyway, here's, for example, a boy looking at another child with a kite in a tree. And that's kind of the beginning of a story. And then the other picture I have here is just one that I did a little while back, but again has to do with festivals and very, very Hong Kong. But I've been working a lot on sort of fine art gallery things. I have been working on some non-fiction. I've been changing it and changing it and changing it. And there may be publishers. I'm not sure. I'll have to see. It's very hard work. And then, but I go and carry on drawing too. I mean, yes, on the MTR. These are on, these are on the London Underground. Oh no, one's Hong Kong. First one's London Underground. And then on the plane. And then in Dubai Airport. Where I had 7 hours to wait. So basically, stories are everywhere. And that's true for all of you, whether you're using words as poetry, or as your own little stories or big stories, or whether you're an artist. They're there, and they connect us. And they're fun as well, actually. There's nothing like spying on people without them noticing that you're doing it. Drawing them, waiting for the train to go. They have no idea. I'm hiding behind an iPad. There you are.
Well,
okay, and now we need some questions. Yes.
We'll see your 4th picture books coming up.
Well, I don't know. We will see. It's hard pulling things together.
Shall we leave some question and
let's
questions
some questions
to the floor?
Yeah. Yes.
Are there any questions? For Dot.
Questions? Anything you like? Oh,
yes.
Right.
At the back.
Yeah. Come forward, maybe. Yeah, sure.
Do you think children's books should be as much for the adult reading for the child as it is for the child?
No, I think it should be for the child first. First and foremost. And the child has to see, because the main character, you have to have somebody. How old is that person going to be? And you have one character, which everybody has to identify. And actually, oddly enough, adults, you can feel the child within, but can a child feel an adult within? No, because they've never been there yet. So, no, it should be the other way around. Definitely, child first. Child's ears, eyes,
Yes.
Yeah, go on.
Who is your favorite characters among all of your books?
Are my books? It's not an easy one. I could say a starfish or something. No. I think I probably quite like my sand turtle, actually. I quite like him. Her. It. Yeah, I think, yeah. What about you? Which one do you like that you've seen? You haven't seen very many of mine through this. It's a mixture, isn't it? Let's think. Oh, it's mine. Well, there's a sand turtle. Yeah. You like a sand turtle. A lot of people, my non-fiction, have liked this one. They often like that one. Okay. Any more questions? You ask another one if you like. Go on. There are various illustration courses across the world. And there isn't anything in... I don't know. Maybe there is in Hong Kong now. There are often short courses everywhere. There is an American-led organization called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, or Writers and Book Illustrators, anyway, of which I'm a member. And they will often, give leads, and there are conferences, there are big conferences, sometimes for illustrators. Your formal training, there are short courses, and there are also big, long ones, such as I've been on. You need something. Again, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, they have little subgroups, so you can learn from one another. Grace Lynn, who I showed you at the beginning, was part of that. And in fact, the conference I went on was, when she spoke to me, was that organization. Yeah. Yeah. SCBWI. Yeah. Oh. Sure. Yeah. Well, you can just look up SCBWI, yes. Yeah, look it up, or contact me afterwards. I'll give you leads. The MA in Cambridge is a year and a half or 2 years if you do it part-time. Very intense. And there are others in the UK, good ones, Brighton, Falmouth, sometimes in quite obscure places.
Do you think it's good to have a kind of a critique group among the illustrators that you can learn from each other?
I think it is. Actually, I don't do it. I think it is. And, you know, you get that, again, on a course, you do critique one another, partly because in Cambridge there were far too few tutors per student. Way. I mean, the tutorials were 10 minutes. That was it. You really... It's not a well-designed course, actually. It's a problem. But... and pressure on the lecturers and the tutors. So I think you do need one another. Here, it's a bit isolated, because so many people have just left Hong Kong. But I actually don't quite like input from anybody. Absolutely anybody. I mean, my own sons would say, what's that? You know, like, very good. I mean, one in particular who, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dot.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes.
That is a very big and a very good question. Well, I would ask anybody, is there any subject you wouldn't want to discuss? Now, some things are really outside a child's experience, but not outside their curiosity pretty soon, you know? I mean, they'll know death, they'll know dementia. You know, why is the elderly all forgetting everything? Or changing character? Depression. Why is this person who used to be nice suddenly, horrible? You know, or really, and having a hard time. So I think everything, in a way, is possible, but you have to deal with it very carefully. But, you know, compassion is really the answer for almost, well, yeah, for everything. Is how you get there. But yeah, it's a very good question. Much asked question.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Any more questions? One last question?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's sort of the comic book. You mean sort of humorous books, or do you mean the layout? The layout, yeah. Raymond Briggs, the snowman, you know, Johnny Raymond Briggs, where is he? Yep, there we go. He wrote really comic strips, and with sometimes a bigger picture like that. And a lot of, he said he got too much to say, really. So he did it like that. So I think when you've got a lot to say, it can be really nice to do these, you know, vignettes, actually. And of course, bande dessinée in France, it's been a tradition forever there. And also Japanese manga, the same, with characters. And I think it's just moving at a different pace. I quite like these ones that move quite fast. It would probably suit my head too, but I have to then draw more quickly or create. The technique mustn't get in the way. Because with this way, the snowman and that, what you say, more comic layout, you've definitely got to have the drawing first. You know, it's got to come, it's very immediate. And I think the best picture books actually are. They have an immediacy, which sometimes mine don't, my pictures don't. I think it's a good question. I think it's just moving at a different pace. And what's nice about those books is that there's a sort of private sense of control as you turn over the page, yeah? Although, in fact, the illustrator and the author are in control because of the design and how they've done it. But I think it's a lovely private way of entering a narrative, manga and bande dessinée. And, there's a lovely illustrator, Isabelle Arsenault, a Canadian, who does it nicely too. Any more? Nice question. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Any more? Any more? Yeah.
One last question.
Any
One
questions? I don't want
very
people to
last
go away,
question.
or you can write to me and ask me. Yeah, I mean,
Otherwise-
you can have a look. I don't know whether I managed to put my. I think at the bottom I might have. Anyway, if you, there's some spying at the end. There's my. That's in the Foreign Correspondence Club. Yeah, you can look up. It's pretty easy website to remember. Look up. You can contact me through that easily.
Okay, thank you, Dot, for sharing your work and your views and your experiences on illustrating and writing picture book. And I hope one day we'll see your work, your beautiful illustration art at the upcoming book fairs.
Well, it would be fun.
And
yeah.
I think it will be well
It's hard to make it
shared
work.
with yes, well deserved.
It's always work.
A
Thank you.
good exhibition here. And yes, your book, Sand Turtle,
Yeah,
is
so back
at
there.
the back now.
Yep.
So if anyone wants to pick a copy and
Yeah.
have Dot signed your personal copy, please do it.
They make good presents. I usually sell a lot towards Christmas, but they make good presents anytime. And then I've also got a couple of illustrations, one from the sand turtle and then another one, the cotton tree. They're for sale. I've only got a few of those. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And do contact me if you've got questions.
Yep. Thanks for coming.
And thank you, Mary,
Thanks for coming.
who creates
Bye.
lovely books. Do go and see MCCM's books as well. They're beautiful. They're beautifully designed.
So thank you, Miss Theodora, for such an inspiring session. Now may I invite a representative from HKTDC to come onto the stage to present souvenirs for our speakers as a token of appreciation. So if there are no more questions from the floor, this is the end of the seminar. Thank you for coming, and copies of the book are available for purchase at the counter outside the room. Our speakers are also welcome book lovers to line up in the center aisle for autographs. Thank you so much.